Midnight, January 15th, 1966. Nigeria slept, but a storm was about to break. The streets of Kaduna, Ibadan, and Lagos were unusually quiet. Soldiers whispered in the shadows, clutching rifles, their boots crunching softly against the earth. In the stillness of the night, destiny shifted. Within hours, Nigeria's prime minister would vanish. The Sardana of Sokoto, one of the most powerful men in the north, would be executed in his own home. Chief Samuel Akintola, the premier of the western region, would fall to a hail of bullets on his veranda. Senior military officers would be slaughtered in their homes, their wives screaming into the night. By sunrise, the dream of Nigeria's democracy lay in ruins, drowned in blood. This was not just a coup. It was the bloodiest political assassination in Africa's history, a night that forever changed Nigeria. But to understand this horror, we must go back to a time when Nigeria was still young, filled with promise, and already cracking from within. Before I take you deeper into this forgotten story, hit that subscribe button if you love untold African history, because what you're about to hear is one of the darkest nights Africa has ever seen. Nigeria was only 6 years old. Independence had come in 1960 with fireworks and hope. The Union Jack fell. The green-white-green rose. A nation of over 60 million people, the giant of Africa, was born. But beneath the celebration lay cracks. Nigeria wasn't one people. It was a country of hundreds of ethnic groups, divided into three powerful regions. The north, dominated by the House of Fulani, conservative, Islamic, and politically united under the Sardana of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello. The west, home of the Yoruba, proud, intellectual, and restless, led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, though his rival, Chief Samuel Akintola, would soon fracture the region. The east, led by the Igbo, ambitious, modern, and hungry for power, represented by Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first president. From the start, the Nigerian experiment was a marriage of strangers, a union forced by the British, who drew borders without care for ancient rivalries. The First Republic was built on fragile coalitions. Politics was poisoned by ethnic loyalty, corruption, and betrayal. Elections were rigged, ballot boxes stolen, and violence swept across the country. The people whispered, "This is not independence, this is madness." By 1965, Nigeria was boiling. The Western region crisis was tearing the country apart. The 1965 elections in the West were brutally rigged. Opposition parties were silenced, voters beaten, results falsified. The streets of Ibadan, Ogbomosho, and other Yoruba towns erupted in chaos. People called it Operation Weti. Young men doused politicians and their homes in petrol and set them ablaze. Bodies burned in the streets. In the north, Ahmadu Bello and his Northern People's Congress controlled power like a fortress. To many Southerners, the North was holding the country hostage. To Northerners, the South was arrogant and disrespectful of their traditions. Corruption spread like a plague. Ministers stole millions. Contracts were awarded for bribes. The promise of independence was rotting before the people's eyes. And within the army, a new generation of young officers watched with disgust. In Kaduna, a 29-year-old major named Chukwuma Kaduna Nzagwu began to plot. Nzagwu was charismatic, bold, and fanatically disciplined. He had trained in Sandhurst, England, and returned to Nigeria with the dream of cleansing his country. To him, politicians were vermin who deserved to be destroyed. He was joined by fellow young officers, Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna, an Olympic gold medalist turned soldier, Major Adiwal Ademoyega, one of the brains behind the plan, captains and lieutenants who believed Nigeria could only be saved through blood. They saw themselves as revolutionaries, not murderers. They believed they were about to rescue Nigeria from collapse. But revolutions rarely go as planned. Kaduna, January 15th, 1966, 2 a.m. The Sardana of Sokoto, Sir Ahmadu Bello, one of the most powerful figures in Africa, knelt in prayer inside his residence. Outside, soldiers crept closer.
Moments later, gunfire shattered the silence. The Sardana's guards fell. Soldiers stormed in. The revered leader of the North was dragged out and executed. His body, along with that of his senior wife, lay lifeless in the compound. Northern Nigeria would never forgive. Ibadan. Chief Samuel Akintala, Premier of the West, stepped onto his veranda in his pajamas. He carried a pistol, desperate to defend himself, but it was hopeless. Bullets tore through the night. His body collapsed in a pool of blood. In Lagos, at the Prime Minister's residence, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was seized. The quiet, pipe-smoking leader of Nigeria was taken away by soldiers. Days later, his body was found by the roadside, dumped like trash. Senior military officers were also slaughtered. Brigadier Samuel Ademulegan was murdered in his bed in front of his pregnant wife. Colonel Kur Muhammad and Colonel Aboga Largema were gunned down. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Pam was dragged from his home and shot. By dawn, Nigeria's democracy had been decapitated. The radio crackled with Major Nzegu's voice. In the name of the Supreme Council of the Revolution of the Nigerian Armed Forces, I declare martial law for the whole Federation. He promised to sweep away corruption, tribalism, and injustice. But instead of applause, Nigeria was horrified. The coup was brutal, but 5 deaths stood out above all. They were the most powerful men in Nigeria, and their murders shocked the nation. 1. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Prime Minister of Nigeria. Abducted from his Lagos residence in the early hours, he was forced into a vehicle by soldiers led by Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna. Days later, his body was found by the roadside. Some accounts say he was strangled. Others say he collapsed under stress and internal bleeding. Either way, the quiet, pipe-smoking Prime Minister of Nigeria was discarded like refuse. 2. Sir Amadou Bello, Premier of the Northern Region, Sardona of Sokoto. In Kaduna, soldiers led by Major Chukwuma Nzegu stormed his palace. The Sardona, caught in prayer, was dragged outside and shot multiple times. His senior wife was also killed. His palace was burned. To the north, this was not just murder, it was sacrilege. 3. Samuel Ladoke Akintola, Premier of the Western Region. In Ibadan, Akintola heard gunfire and emerged on his veranda in pajamas, pistol in hand. He tried to resist, but was riddled with bullets by soldiers under Major Timothy Onwutegu's command. His body collapsed in a bloody heap. 4. Festus Okoti Ebo, Minister of Finance. Known for flamboyance and corruption, Ebo was dragged from his home in Lagos by coup soldiers. Witnesses say he begged for mercy, even offering money. But under orders from Major Ifeajuna's Lagos unit, he was shot dead. 5. Brigadier Samuel Ademulegan, commander of the 1st Brigade. In Kaduna, soldiers burst into his bedroom. The respected brigadier was gunned down in his bed beside his pregnant wife, who was also killed. This murder outraged many in the military, as even coup rules usually spared women. The killers were Nzegu's loyal officers. Each death was a dagger, and together they shattered Nigeria's fragile union. The coup failed in Lagos. General Johnson Ayiyi Ironsi, the army's most senior officer, quickly moved to crush the rebels. By January 17th, Nzegu and his men were arrested, but the damage was done. For the North, the coup was an unforgivable crime. The Sardona, their greatest leader, was dead. Prime Minister Balewa, gone. Top Northern officers, executed. Whispers began. This was an Igbo coup. Why? Because most of the surviving political leaders were Igbo. President Azikiwe was untouched. General Ironsi, an Igbo, now seized control as head of state. The perception of ethnic favoritism deepened wounds that would soon bleed into open war. In the months that followed, pogroms swept across the north. Thousands of Igbo civilians were massacred. Train stations, markets, and homes ran with blood. Families fled south in terror.
Nigeria was spiraling into darkness. And by July 1966, another coup would strike, a counter-coup led by northern officers. General Aransi was captured and executed. The cycle of blood had begun. Less than a year later, in 1967, Nigeria would explode into civil war. Over 1 million lives would be lost. And it all began with that night in January 1966, Africa's bloodiest coup. The first coup was not just about soldiers and politics. It was about betrayal, ethnic hatred, and the tragedy of a young nation that never got the chance to grow. Nigeria was supposed to be the beacon of Africa, but instead, it became a warning. When corruption festers, when leaders betray their people, when ethnic divisions are ignored, blood follows. If this story gripped you, don't just scroll away. This is Voices of the Forgotten. Hit subscribe for more untold African history. Drop a comment. Do you think the 1966 coup was a revolution or simply murder? And share this video so more people can learn the story of Africa's forgotten tragedies. Because history is not just the past, it is the shadow of the present and the warning for the future.